Hello, it's Kyle. Welcome back to Artist Confessional. On this episode, Chrissy and I are decommissioning our Bloomfield gallery, and we are migrating it to our house here at the studio. Over the course of this summer, our plan is to open up our shop and try to sell artwork from the studio itself proper, and stick around. We're going to be doing that on this episode. Come join me.
What are the secrets of studio practice? I wanna know all your good and bad habits. How do you make art like a pro? There's so many ways to do so. Stick around, cause you'll find out on Artist Confessionals.
Artist Confessions.
Artist Confessionals with Sparkbox Studio.
This year, Chrissy and I joined our local studio tour, and that's kind of given us a kick in the butt, so to speak, for us to get our, pardon my French, get our shit together and actually get some work out in the studio and set up our store to be a proper store. Here is a laundry list of things that Chrissy and I need to do to get the store up and running here at our space. Decommission the Bloomfield gallery, pack up all of the artwork, bring it all home, reconfigure our entire studio space to allow for a retail space to exist. Take whatever scrap wood is left over and try to the best of my abilities plan how I'm going to build cabinetry out of a bunch of leftover bits. Remove all of the artwork from their packages, set up a photography studio, and photograph each and every single individual artwork. Process all of that photography in Photoshop and color correct everything and get it ready for the web. Repackaging all of the artwork with custom labeling. Put artwork into frames and hang everything in the studio. Our Bloomfield gallery project came to an end and we decommissioned everything, we brought it all home. It was pretty sad to see it go, but that's kind of how some projects work. And now we have this opportunity to reimagine this store here in the studio. It's been a little bit since we've had anybody publicly come to the space due to the pandemic and us kind of transitioning out the residency, trying to figure out what we're doing, kind of landing here, and well, you all lived this experience. It is a weird one. Opening up the store to workshops, to selling artwork is kind of our first step towards re-engaging with our community. We are here standing in front of our merchandise display wall. This is the third part of that central table that got deconstructed and rebuilt. What we're hoping to do with this space is across the center part here is to display flat prints in a bit of kind of a record flip through format, while the counter to the left and the counter to the right, those can display other types of merchandise things, such as cloth goods, small prints. And what we're hoping is above here is to have frame featured artwork that we can sell as well. Our space is a bit peculiar in the fact that it serves multi-functions. It is a workspace, it is a workshop space, it is an educational facility, it is the weird space that we make crazy installations in. Trying to strike a balance between kind of that retail space and a working space is difficult. While I was considering what's important and what's not important, I felt that the space needs to be able to function as a workspace first. Predominantly, Chrissy and I do workshops, we make art. Selling artwork out of the studio has never been the kind of high priority that we're trying to make it. And now we're trying to introduce this concept of a retail space into that environment. Getting started was just reconfiguring the studio. This whole thing has kind of maybe been about a 2-year process where we had taken this beat to really figure out how we wanted to lay out the studio. You can watch and read about that story in a different related video. You can get that link just below in the description. And now, kind of with what was left, the scraps, the things that didn't fit anywhere, it's that pile of stuff. That is the puzzle that I have to deal with here. I'm trying to always reuse things within the studio and repurpose stuff, and ultimately that comes from a place of being really kind of low budget. Many of the things that Chrissy and I do are always on the DIY side or repurposed or refurbished, and well, we're in the arts. I don't think I really need to say much more than that. I absolutely love doing this kind of stuff because it makes me feel like I'm being incredibly thrifty. I think it's called thrift crafting. I've used that word before and I'm gonna try and coin it, thrift crafting. What we decided to do was to work with a gallery theme where the top half would just be framed artwork that we won't sell the actual framed stuff, but they'll be there as a representation. There's a trouble with selling prints is that it takes up X square feet of real estate to show just one thing. And unless you're going to have a committed customer come in and like flip through all of your bins and go through every single one and look at each one individually, it's always a struggle for us to present as much as possible in a surface area. Does that make sense? I've tried to make a very narrow merchandise wall. I didn't want it to be too imposing, but I wanted it to kind of function kind of as a store, but in times that we're not necessarily using the store, I could unload it all and it could be additional counter space, which Christy and I have definitely taken advantage of while making a bunch of the pop-ups recently. Really, everything kind of comes down to like, I want to show a lot of things that occupy a lot of space, and I have a very limited space, so how can I do that can provide visual cues for the customer to be like, oh, I engage it in this kind of way.
I've been building these little wood standees so that we could vertically display different prints and encourage people or the viewer to rifle through.
The merchandise wall is a bit of a smattering of different objects. It's predominantly either 3/4 inch birch plywood or 1/2 inch birch plywood. Particle board birch plywood, not real birch plywood. For anybody that's a woodworker, there's a difference between those two things. And it's mostly just scraps of all of the different counters that I have built throughout the studio over the years. And it is really just if we really inspect it, it's really just cobbled together, and anybody who is a woodworker, I am sorry, but this thrift crafting, remember? That's the term for this video, it's thrift crafting. This is our second attempt at creating a retail space. Technically, Chrissy and I have always sold artwork, like since we kind of opened, you could always come into the studio and perchance buy something from us. But now the Bloomfield Gallery was our first real attempt, and this is our second realist attempt. And I'm trying my hardest to make sure that all of our things are managed correctly. And now it's not just about that in-person store here, because that needs to also reflect accurately to our online store, where we have been operating for quite a number of years. And for us, it's kind of starting to get like, I'm realizing how complicated it gets once you start doing like an online store and an in-person store, and you don't really necessarily have some crazy POS system that tracks everything across all of the data. I'm finding I'm having to spend a little bit more time on the back end of our website, making sure that quantities are shorn up between like the website and in person, so that we never run into a circumstance where somebody buys something online and we don't have it here. Because that's the last thing we want, is to send a really awkward email to somebody saying, hey, I'm so sorry that we don't have that print. Maybe you would like this one or this one or this one. When artwork is completed, it goes through my hands where I set up lights, I set up a tripod, I set up a camera, and I photograph everything. There's like a blanket set number of pictures I try to aim for. One is the product like zoomed out really far so you can see like the edges of the paper or the whole thing. Then there's a shot that is like just tight to the image. There's always a shot kind of angled across the image. I don't know why. And then there's usually about 3 to 5 detail shots. These things go through Photoshop afterwards. They get color corrected, they get some sort of curve applied to them, they get bumped up, they get properly cropped, and we create 2 copies, because not only are we trying to make stuff for the store, which is a specific resolution, but then this is our artwork. All this stuff goes into a portfolio and becomes an important and integral part of creating applications for projects and shows and galleries and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Our prints are packaged with crystal clear bags, and they have been really fantastic. They are an archival bag, which means that they won't leach acid all over our print, and we purchase 4-ply. I think it's 4-ply archival backer for the prints to help support them in the package. So that will also protect them. This is the basic package. Everything's archival because that's important, because we're printmakers and paper and archival, but everything gets a bag, gets an archival board, and then we include a information card in the back about the title of the work, the who made it, the size of it, the material, the edition number, the year, and kind of just the generic information about the print. We are packaging with plastic. It's not my favorite thing to do. I would love to hear any sort of advice for plastic alternatives that maybe are biodegradable, but still waterproof and still can protect like plastic. If anybody has anything like that, please just leave it in the comments below. I'm actually very curious, and I'm curious to get away from plastic, but I actually don't know really what to do, because it's the only thing that really protects stuff. It's just so easy for a paper good to get damaged that I can't run the risk. Like, there's only sometimes 12 in the edition, and if somebody touches it with dirty fingerprints, like, come on, you can only erase so much before it's just unsalvageable. As Chrissy and I begin to get our physical store in line to open up this summer, we are looking at ways that we can improve everything. That includes the online store, that includes the physical space, kind of how we talk about stuff, how we present stuff. And one of the things that we have been talking about is that there is a bit of a mystery around what printmaking is, and we want to create, I don't know, maybe a promotional video or to do something, perhaps maybe put on our online store that will help illuminate what printmaking is, especially analog printmaking. Like when I say etching and I say woodcut and I say relief print, it's important to tell people and help show people like what it actually means to have like a physical print of something. We're looking forward to having the store and trying to encourage people here because I find it's easier to explain these processes and what these things are when you can be like, it's printed on this specific machine here using these tools and this stuff. Chrissy and I are incredibly excited to reopen our studio to the community because it's been a little while. And I'm ready to like have that space open. I'm ready to run demos. I'm ready to do workshops. And I'm excited to see how our space engages over the next summer as we are members of the studio tour for the first time. And I don't feel like we've ever really given our retail space here on the studio property like enough of attention. And this feels like the first time we're actually doing that. And I'm excited to see what happens. I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks for hanging out, and it's been lovely. See you next time.
What are the secrets of studio practice?